Hello, and welcome to Audio Log 2, Fried Eggs. The date is February 1st. The rescue team has received no distress calls. With my newfound free time, I did something I might come to regret. In the young hours of the day, I snuck into Ellis's room and retrieved 3 tapes. Each one was a recording detailing recent nightmares in the same fashion as a dream journal. I had planned to only keep the recordings long enough to create copies. I knew I wouldn't have been able to listen to the tapes in my hotel room. It would have been too risky with Ellis next door, and listening on the excavation site was out of the question. But it had been a Sunday. On Sunday, I wasn't being paid to be on site, or to continue my investigation on Mr. Ellis, even though the latter was slowly becoming a hobby. I'd driven a company truck into town with the tapes in a messenger bag, which sat taunting my curiosity from the passenger seat. I'd decided the only place I could get enough privacy to listen to the tapes was a quaint diner, isolated at one of the outskirt streets of Crepea. Entering, a waitress in a soda fountain blue uniform, which matched the interior color scheme of the place, escorted me to an out-of-the-way booth in a back corner. I ordered a coffee, and as she walked away towards the kitchen, I carefully pulled the 3 tapes over the back, placing them each on the table, and sifting through them for a moment to find the first tape in order according to date. As I placed the first tape into the player, the waitress poured my cup of coffee. If I'd have looked, I'm sure I would have noticed her glaring at the tapes lazily spread out over the booth. I picked up the cup, and chose something to zone out to while I listened to Ellis's dream logs. Subconsciously, I decided to stare at the front door of the establishment. The vast majority of Dreamlog 1 was familiar. It was what I had overheard him saying through the wall on the 27th of last month, January. After my memory was sufficiently jogged, I found myself focused on the door more than the tape. Especially when a man in an all-black suit, complete with a trench coat, promenaded into the restaurant. There was something unplaceable yet definitively odd about his sharp features and piercing eyes. However, for the life of me I couldn't tell what stood out about him other than how contrasting his choice of dress was compared to all the other dining patrons. When he sat down, he sat at the booth in front of mine. Now playing Ellis's first dream log.
The rain soaks my bones. Red rain falling for what's down there. It's alive and breathing. I'm the only one who can save it. The holes in our skin and in the ground will be symbols. Punishments, sacrifices, necessary. All those lettered, spoken names are ants. Cattle to be slaughtered for purpose. Their conjoined and molded blood was the rain. 8 out of the bunch, you're it.
End of Dreamlog 1. The man sitting in front of me ordered 2 fried eggs, and spent the rest of his time staring blankly at his folded hands on the table. Dreamlog 2.
The hole in the ground plays her song. She is grotesquely alive, but not yet built. We will march willingly into her many gaping maws, like ants to an anthill. A beautifully terrifying hill of tendrils and eyes with unthinkable shapes as pupils. Don't forget the mouths, all gaping and snapping. She's got no lips, just teeth. Every oozing inch of her gives me purpose, gives me sense. Is it really so abnormal to have a dream that feels like it truly means something? Like something burrowed in your subconscious and won't let you get rid of it? We all have dreams that feel too detailed, like they've gone on for weeks. And they all mean something.
End of Dreamlog 2. Dreamlog 3.
She is not a hill, not a mass. She's thin and tall, and her shifting head's got antlers like coral. She's stuck. She was suffocating. In the infinite darkness of my dreams, her presence keeps me sane. Her voice being sung by the twisted voices of angels. never meant for humans to understand, let alone behold. But I knew it was beautiful, just as her and her sunken temple. In the dream, I could feel blood rushing out of my eyes and ears, just like Jackie. It's a shame she couldn't bear the message yet.
End of Dreamlog 3. In hindsight, I've realized the stranger hadn't been zoning out to his hands in the booth in front of me. He'd also been listening. Shortly after I finished listening to the final recording, I left and walked back to the company truck in the parking lot. In contrast to before I had listened to them, this time I tossed the bag of tapes into the back seat. While putting the keys into the ignition, I let my eyes wander back into the diner. The man in the long jacket was staring directly at me, currently in the process of leaving a tip at his table. He'd waited till I left to leave himself. In the moment, I'd pushed it to the back of my head. But a few moments later, on the road, it was a fact that I found particularly hard to ignore, especially when I realized that there was a car following me. At first, I wasn't completely sure it wasn't just vague paranoid anxiety, similar to that residual feeling good horror stories give. As nerves set in, I began to take strange, unpredictable loops through roads I'd already passed, yet every turn I made the car mirrored. Sometimes it would slow down to convince me I'd lost it, but I'd always spot it again somewhere behind me. My fight-or-flight response kicked in, and I opted to head towards the dig site instead of the hotel. For all I knew, the driver, who I admit I could not see but definitely had my suspicions about, was trying to follow me to figure out where I lived. I wasn't willing to take the chance, and thus set out on the long, desolate road towards excavation. I knew I'd only be able to stay for a few hours before the final mining crew's shifts ended and the site was closed for the night, but I figured that would be enough time to wait out the stalker. At some point after I arrived, I found myself standing on an out-of-the-way rock, overlooking the square hole. I could feel the wind gently pushing back on me, and for a moment I could swear I not only heard, but felt the hole begin to hum out to me. Almost as if planted in my head, I had a very strange idea. At the time, it didn't seem even slightly out of the ordinary. In the final hour before closing, I had made up my mind to stay overnight. I prepared by laying among the rocks and dirt, hidden. As I stayed lying there, staring up at the setting sun, I hadn't noticed myself begin to doze off. I hadn't woken up until several hours later, where I found myself blanketed by a dark, sparkling sky. I quietly pushed myself up out of the dirt and took a moment to glance back at the hole, where I saw Henry Ellis standing. I wasn't meant to be there, but he wasn't either, not at this time, not in the deeper hours of the night. He stood staring down into what might have been an infinite abyss. At first, I took his whispers as incoherent, but the more I strained my ears trying to listen, the more every word he spoke cut through the silence. Soon, although I could not understand what he'd been saying, the swarming words pounded through my head, crawling through my skin. Before long, his droning words became too much to handle. I felt myself fall to the ground as the world faded out, but I never felt an impact. In the final millisecond-long moments that I was conscious for, I was terrified.